The sharp afternoon light filtered through the conference room windows, casting long shadows across the polished oak table. Captain Eliza Morgan fought the urge to adjust her collar as she observed the scene unfolding before her. Nothing unusual about a high-level military briefing at Westridge Strategic Command. Officers came and went daily, discussing everything from tactical operations to supply chain logistics. What made her look twice was the woman who entered last. She moved with the kind of deliberate confidence that made seasoned officers straighten their posture. No military insignia adorned her tailored suit. No security badge hung from her neck. Just a sleek leather portfolio tucked under one arm and shoes that looked more suited to European boardrooms than government facilities. When Colonel James Harrington extended his hand in greeting, the woman simply looked at it, then at him, and declined the gesture with a subtle shake of her head. The 5 words she spoke next silenced the entire room. "I'm here to save lives." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Captain Morgan watched as Colonel Harrington's face cycled through confusion, irritation, and finally uneasy respect. 23 years in military intelligence had taught Eliza to read people, and everything about this situation triggered her professional instincts. The visitor, mid-30s, Morgan guessed, didn't seem concerned about the tension her refusal had created. Instead, her gaze methodically assessed the room, lingering on the digital displays, the communication equipment, even the security cameras positioned discreetly in the corners. "Ma'am, I need to see your security clearance and identification," Colonel Harrington said, recovering his composure. His voice carried the practiced neutrality of someone accustomed to command. The woman didn't immediately respond. She set her portfolio on the table and surveyed the assembled officers with the calculated precision of someone evaluating assets rather than meeting colleagues. Her eyes briefly met Morgan's, and Eliza felt an unexpected moment of recognition, not personal familiarity, but the silent acknowledgement between professionals who understood things others didn't. "I assume this is about the Blackstone briefing," interrupted Major Ryan Donovan, the colonel's executive officer, "though I don't recall adding civilian consultants to the attendance list." His tone wasn't hostile, just carefully controlled. The woman's expression remained unchanged as she waited, creating a pocket of uncomfortable silence that no one seemed eager to fill. There was something unsettling about her stillness, not the nervous energy of someone who had wandered into the wrong meeting, but the patient composure of someone who knew exactly why she was there and what would happen next. Eliza felt a familiar tightness between her shoulder blades, the instinctive response honed through 3 combat deployments and countless intelligence operations. Something about this scenario felt wrong, though she couldn't precisely identify what. The woman wasn't acting like a typical security breach. Those were usually marked by either obvious nervousness or overcompensating confidence. This was different. This was the calm certainty of purpose. "Colonel, perhaps we should verify her credentials before proceeding," Eliza suggested, her voice quiet but carrying the weight of experience. Standard protocol for unscheduled participants. As Colonel Harrington reached for the phone to call security, Eliza studied the woman more carefully. Her charcoal gray suit was impeccably tailored, but showed subtle signs of travel, the kind of minor creases that accumulated during long flights or car rides. The portfolio she carried was expensive leather, but worn at the corners and edges, not from neglect but from regular use. Most revealing was her posture, perfectly balanced, weight evenly distributed, hands relaxed but positioned for quick movement if necessary. It was the stance of someone trained to appear non-threatening while remaining ready for anything. Within minutes, Lieutenant Colonel Victoria Hayes entered from the adjacent room. As Westridge's chief of security operations, Hayes handled all clearance issues personally. Her reputation for thoroughness bordered on legendary. Officers joked that Hayes could find discrepancies in God's paperwork. "What seems to be the problem?" Hayes asked, her gaze immediately focusing on the unknown woman. "We have an unidentified visitor claiming to be here for the Blackstone briefing," Harrington explained. No credentials presented. Hayes approached the woman directly. "Ma'am, I'll need to see your identification and security clearance documentation. Westridge is a Class A restricted facility, and all personnel must be properly vetted before participating in strategic briefings." The woman nodded once, a slight movement that somehow managed to convey both understanding and a complete lack of concern. Then she spoke, her voice measured and clear. The identification you're looking for doesn't exist in your system." The room went silent. Hayes blinked, momentarily thrown off her carefully maintained protocol. "I don't understand. Are you saying you don't have clearance to be here?" "I'm saying," the woman replied, maintaining unwavering eye contact, "that my authorization exists above your classification level." Harrington stepped forward, his patience visibly thinning. "Ma'am, regardless of what clearance you believe you have, in this facility, everyone follows the same security protocols. If you can't provide proper identification, I'll have to ask you to leave until this can be sorted out." The woman tilted her head slightly, studying the colonel with an expression that bordered on clinical. "Your communication security has been compromised for the past 72 hours. Every transmission, every file transfer, every operational detail discussed in this room has been intercepted, recorded, and analyzed by hostile intelligence. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us." Now back to the story. The statement landed like a physical blow. Eliza watched as her colleagues processed the accusation. Shock, disbelief, and then the creeping realization that this might not be a baseless claim. Military officers were trained to consider worst-case scenarios, and the possibility of compromised communications represented a catastrophic breach. "That's impossible," Major Donovan said, though Eliza noted the uncertainty in his voice. "Our systems are isolated and encrypted. All communications go through multiple security protocols." "Yes," the woman agreed, "and those protocols have been bypassed using a sophisticated algorithm designed specifically for Westridge's network architecture. The intrusion is virtually undetectable because it mimics normal data flow patterns while creating micro-delays for extraction." Hayes had pulled out her tablet and was rapidly checking something. "Security logs," Eliza guessed, "or system diagnostics." "Our latest security sweep was clean," she said, though her tone lacked conviction. "No anomalies reported in the past week." "Because your security sweeps are being fed sanitized data," the woman replied. "The intrusion exists within the verification system itself. You're asking the compromised system to verify its own integrity." The logic was sound, which made it all the more disturbing. Eliza had worked on enough counterintelligence operations to know that the most dangerous breaches weren't the ones that triggered alarms. They were the ones that convinced you everything was functioning normally while systematically extracting your most sensitive information. "Colonel," Eliza said, keeping her voice steady, "we should at least investigate these claims before dismissing them." Harrington's jaw tightened. He was a good officer, methodical, thorough, and committed to protocol. But protocol wasn't designed for situations where the very systems you relied on might be compromised. "And how exactly do you suggest we verify something our security systems can't detect?" he asked. Before Eliza could respond, the conference room door opened, and General Diana Keller strode in. At 58, Keller commanded not just Westridge Strategic Command, but the respect of everyone in the defense intelligence community. Her silver hair was cut in a practical bob, and her uniform bore the weight of decorations earned through decades of distinguished service. The room immediately snapped to attention, but General Keller's focus was solely on the unknown woman. "I see you decided to make an entrance after all," she said, her tone suggesting both familiarity and mild exasperation. "The situation accelerated," the woman replied simply. Keller nodded as if this explained everything, then addressed the confused officers. "Stand down, everyone. This is Dr. Sophia Reeves. As of right now, she has operational authority regarding our communications security, with clearance directly from the Joint Chiefs." The revelation sent a ripple of shock through the room. Joint Chiefs clearance meant this wasn't just a security concern, it was a national security priority. Colonel Harrington recovered first, professional training overriding his personal confusion. "General, with all due respect, some advance notice would have been appreciated. We have protocols for conventional threats, yes," Keller interrupted. "What we're dealing with isn't conventional." Dr. Reeves identified a pattern of sophisticated intrusions targeting critical military communications infrastructure. Westridge is the 7th installation she's visited in the past 2 weeks. Eliza studied Dr. Reeves with new understanding. The woman's refusal to shake hands now made sense. Not a social slight, but operational security. Physical contact was one of the most basic vectors for tracking materials. Microscopic tags that could be transferred through skin contact and used for surveillance. It was an extreme precaution, but one that spoke volumes about the severity of the threat they were facing. "How bad is it?" Hayes asked, professional concern overriding protocol. Dr. Reeves opened her portfolio and removed a small device about the size of a smartphone but considerably thicker. "Critical. Your system has been compromised at the firmware level. Every piece of data transmitted through Westridge's networks in the past 72 hours should be considered exposed." The implications were staggering. Westridge coordinated operations across 3 continents, managed intelligence sharing with key allies, and maintained secure communications with deployed special operations teams. A 3-day breach meant operational details, agent identities, and strategic plans could all be compromised. "We need to isolate the network immediately," Harrington said, reaching for the phone. "Don't," Dr. Reeves said sharply. "Using internal communications will alert them that we've detected the breach. We need to track the intrusion to its source before they can implement countermeasures." General Keller nodded in agreement. "Dr. Reeves has a team standing by. Captain Morgan, you'll coordinate with her. Your background in signals intelligence makes you the most qualified person here to assist." Eliza felt a momentary surge of surprise. Her work in signals intelligence was part of her classified service record, not something casually referenced in open briefings. The fact that General Keller mentioned it so directly indicated just how seriously they were taking this situation. "Understood, General," she replied, automatically shifting into operational mode. "What's our first step?" Dr. Reeves was already connecting her device to a port on the conference room table. Not the standard network connection, but a diagnostic port normally used by technical maintenance staff. "First, we establish a clean monitoring channel that bypasses the compromised systems. Then we identify the exact nature of the intrusion, its entry points, and its data extraction methods." The device powered on, displaying a complex interface that Eliza recognized as a military-grade signal analyzer, far more sophisticated than standard equipment. Dr. Reeves typed rapidly, navigating through security protocols with the practiced efficiency of someone who had designed them. "There," she said, after several minutes. "I've established a secure connection that should be invisible to the intruders. Now we can see what they see." The display shifted, showing dozens of data streams flowing through Westridge's communication network. To most observers, it would have appeared normal, standard military traffic with appropriate encryption markers and security verifications. But Eliza immediately noticed what Dr. Reeves had identified: microscopic timing inconsistencies in the data packets, millisecond delays that shouldn't exist in a properly functioning system. "Those delays," Eliza said, pointing to the anomalies, "they're creating processing windows for data extraction." Dr. Reeves nodded, a flash of professional appreciation in her eyes. "Exactly. Each delay provides just enough time for the intrusion program to copy the data packet, compress it, and forward it to an external receiver before allowing the original to continue to its destination. The security protocols register the delay as normal network latency." Quote, Colonel Harrington leaned closer, studying the display with growing concern. "How sophisticated are we talking? Nation-state level?" "Beyond that," Dr. Reeves replied. "This isn't just sophisticated programming, it's innovative. They're not just exploiting known vulnerabilities. They're creating new attack vectors that our current security paradigms aren't designed to detect." Eliza felt a chill that had nothing to do with the conference room's temperature. In intelligence work, the most dangerous adversaries weren't those with superior resources, but those with superior creativity. The ability to develop approaches that existing security systems weren't designed to counter. "Can you trace the source?" General Keller asked. Dr. Reeves adjusted her equipment, expanding the analysis to include external connection points. "They're routing through multiple proxy servers, but there's always a pattern if you know what to look for. The extraction has to go somewhere." As they worked, Eliza noticed something on the display, a periodic spike in data transmission that occurred approximately every 20 minutes. "Those transmission bursts," she said. "They're scheduled rather than opportunistic." "Good catch," Dr. Reeves replied. "That suggests they're not just passively collecting data, they're actively monitoring for specific information. The scheduled transmissions are probably automated reports back to their control point." Colonel Harrington had moved to the window, staring out at the Westridge compound as if searching for physical intruders. General, shouldn't we at least alert other facilities? If this is happening here, it could be happening elsewhere. It is happening elsewhere, Dr. Reeves said without looking up from her work. Westridge is the 7th confirmed intrusion point. We've identified similar patterns at Strategic Command, Fort Braxton, Lakenheath Air Base, and 3 Naval Intelligence Centers. The scope of the breach was expanding with each new piece of information, transforming from a serious security incident into what could be the largest intelligence compromise in recent history. Eliza's mind raced through the implications. Operational plans exposed, personnel at risk, strategic advantages eliminated. There, Dr. Reeves said suddenly. I've isolated a unique signature in the extraction protocol. It's using a variant of quantum encryption that leaves distinctive markers in the compression algorithm. She adjusted her equipment, focusing on the newly identified pattern. The primary extraction point is local, within 5 miles of Westridge. They're using proximity to minimize transmission time and reduce detection risk. General Keller moved to the conference room phone, not the internal system, but a secure external line that bypassed Westridge's network entirely. I'm activating Sentinel response. Full counterintelligence team, communications specialists, and tactical support. Silent approach, no radio communication until they're in position. Eliza knew what this meant. Sentinel response was reserved for the most critical counterintelligence operations, the ones where traditional military or law enforcement response might compromise sensitive information or alert perpetrators. How long before they realize we've detected them? Eliza asked Dr. Reeves. If we maintain this passive monitoring without attempting countermeasures, we should have approximately 40 minutes before their next automated security scan has a chance of detecting our presence. Colonel Harrington rejoined the group, his initial skepticism replaced by focused determination. What do you need from us, Dr. Reeves? Your best technical analyst familiar with Westridge's communication architecture and someone who knows the surrounding area intimately. We need to pinpoint the extraction equipment before they detect our investigation. Captain Morgan will continue assisting you, General Keller said. And Major Donovan knows every inch of this region. He conducted the original security survey when Westridge was established. Dr. Reeves nodded, accepting the assignments without comment. She turned to Eliza. Captain, I need you to help me map the exact pathway of the intrusion through Westridge's systems. Every compromised node, every affected database, every vulnerability they've exploited. The task was enormous. Westridge's communications network encompassed hundreds of secure systems handling everything from personnel records to operational planning. But Eliza understood the necessity. They couldn't just remove the intrusion. They needed to understand exactly what had been compromised. I'll need access to the central network architecture diagrams, Eliza said. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes was already moving toward the door. I'll have them brought here. Secure courier, no digital transmission. As Hayes left, Dr. Reeves continued working, her fingers moving across her equipment with practiced precision. The intrusion is sophisticated, but it's not perfect. They've left minute traces in the system timestamp synchronization protocols, probably assumed no one would look that deeply into such a fundamental process. Eliza moved closer, studying the display over Dr. Reeves' shoulder. The timestamp anomalies were barely perceptible, millisecond variations that would appear as normal system fluctuations to standard monitoring tools. But when viewed as a pattern across multiple systems, they created a distinct signature that pointed to deliberate manipulation. They're using the timestamps to create synchronization windows, Eliza realized. Every time the system performs a clock adjustment, they're inserting their extraction code into the process. Dr. Reeves nodded, a brief flash of approval crossing her features. Exactly. It's elegant, using the system's own maintenance functions as a Trojan horse. Outside the conference room windows, Eliza could see increased activity as security personnel moved with purpose across the compound. General Keller had activated protocols without triggering obvious alarms. No sirens, no lockdowns, just the subtle shift in movement patterns that indicated heightened readiness. Major Donovan returned with a topographical map of the area surrounding Westridge, spreading it across the conference table. What exactly are we looking for? Signal transmission equipment, Dr. Reeves replied. Something with line of sight to Westridge's main communication array. It would need stable power, minimal interference, and an inconspicuous location. Donovan studied the map, his expression thoughtful. "There's an old communications relay station on this ridge," he said, pointing to a location approximately 3 miles northeast of the facility. It was decommissioned when Westridge was upgraded 5 years ago, but the infrastructure is still there. "Perfect cover," Eliza noted. They could install equipment in an abandoned government facility without raising suspicions. Local power grid would mask their energy consumption, and the existing antenna mounts would provide ideal positioning for interception equipment. Dr. Reeves was already adjusting her monitoring equipment to focus on the identified location. The signal pattern matches. Transmission bursts are consistent with the distance and topography. General Keller moved to the secure phone again. Sentinel team, redirecting to the old relay station. Silent approach, full electronic countermeasures. No one transmits anything until they have visual confirmation. The tension in the room was palpable as they waited. Dr. Reeves continued monitoring the intrusion, tracking data flows, and mapping compromised systems. Eliza worked alongside her, identifying affected operations and assessing potential intelligence losses. The scope of the breach was staggering, not just current operations, but historical data, personnel files, and strategic planning documents. "They've been thorough," Eliza said quietly. "This isn't opportunistic intelligence gathering. They knew exactly what they were looking for." Dr. Reeves nodded, her expression grim. This level of targeted extraction suggests they had inside knowledge of Westridge's information architecture. They didn't just break in, they navigated directly to the most valuable data. The implication hung in the air. Someone with access to classified information had either wittingly or unwittingly provided the attackers with a roadmap to Westridge's most sensitive systems. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes returned with a sealed case containing the network architecture diagrams. As she placed it on the table, her tablet chimed with an incoming message. "Sentinel team reports they've reached the relay station. Building appears occupied. Vehicle parked behind the main structure. Commercial van with civilian markings." Dr. Reeves looked up from her equipment. "They need to move now. The next automated security scan starts in 12 minutes. If they detect our investigation, they'll initiate emergency data purge protocols." General Keller relayed the instructions through the secure line. On the other side of the room, Colonel Harrington stood with his arms crossed, watching the situation unfold with the tightly controlled expression of a commander whose domain had been compromised. "How did you know?" he asked Dr. Reeves, his voice low enough that only she and Eliza could hear. "What made you focus on Westridge specifically?" Dr. Reeves didn't look up from her work as she answered. "Pattern recognition. After we discovered the first intrusion at Fort Braxton, we analyzed the communication patterns between compromised systems and identified likely targets based on data flow relationships. Westridge was statistically the next logical point of attack." Her answer was professional, precise, and entirely unsatisfying. Eliza suspected there was more to the story, something Dr. Reeves wasn't sharing. But now wasn't the time to press for details. Hayes's tablet chimed again. "Sentinel team has secured the relay station. 2 individuals in custody, equipment intact." Dr. Reeves immediately adjusted her monitoring system. "They've stopped transmission. We need to lock down the intrusion points before they can activate remote destruction protocols." Her fingers flew across the keyboard, implementing countermeasures that isolated the compromised systems without alerting them to the intervention. Eliza watched in fascination as Dr. Reeves navigated Westridge's security architecture with the familiarity of someone who had designed it. "There," Dr. Reeves said after several intense minutes, "I've quarantined the intrusion points and disabled their self-destruct capabilities. The equipment at the relay station should provide us with valuable intelligence on who's behind this operation." General Keller ended her call on the secure line. "Sentinel team reports the equipment is military-grade with custom modifications. Preliminary assessment suggests nation-state resources with advanced technical capabilities." The room fell silent as the implications settled over everyone present. This wasn't just a security breach. It was a coordinated attack on America's military intelligence infrastructure by a sophisticated adversary with significant resources. "What happens now?" Colonel Harrington asked, his voice carefully controlled. "Full security audit," General Keller replied. "Every system, every protocol, every piece of hardware. Dr. Reeves will oversee the process with her team. In the meantime, we implement emergency communication procedures. Nothing sensitive goes through electronic channels until we're certain the network is secure." Dr. Reeves was already packing her equipment, her movements efficient and practiced. "Captain Morgan, I'd like you to continue assisting with the investigation. Your signals intelligence background will be valuable in understanding exactly what they were targeting and why." Eliza nodded, recognizing the assignment for what it was, not just a technical role, but an acknowledgement of her ability to see patterns that others might miss. "Of course." As the initial crisis response transitioned into methodical investigation, the conference room began to empty. General Keller departed with Colonel Harrington to brief higher command, while Lieutenant Colonel Hayes coordinated with security teams to implement enhanced protocols throughout Westridge. Eventually, only Eliza and Dr. Reeves remained in the room, surrounded by maps, diagrams, and the quiet hum of electronic equipment. There was a moment of silence before Eliza asked the question that had been forming in her mind since Dr. Reeves first entered the room. "Why refuse the handshake? If you were here on official business with Joint Chiefs clearance, why create unnecessary tension?" Dr. Reeves looked up from her equipment, studying Eliza with an evaluating gaze that seemed to assess not just the question but the person asking it. "Because I needed to see how they would respond," she said finally. "Security isn't just about systems and protocols, it's about people. How they react to the unexpected, how they handle situations that don't fit neatly into established procedures." The handshake was a test. "And did we pass?" Eliza asked. Dr. Reeves closed her portfolio with a decisive click. "You did. You questioned the situation without dismissing the possibility that standard protocols might be insufficient. That's rare, especially in established military structures. Coming from someone with Dr. Reeves, apparent authority, the assessment felt like both a compliment and a responsibility. Eliza had spent her career working within the system while recognizing its limitations, a balance that had sometimes made her an outsider among more traditional officers. "This isn't over, is it?" Eliza asked, though she already knew the answer. "No," Dr. Reeves replied, her voice carrying the weight of certainty. "What we found today is just one operation in a much larger campaign. They'll adapt, modify their approach, and try again. Our job is to be ready when they do." As they gathered their materials and prepared to join the ongoing investigation, Eliza realized that today marked a fundamental shift in her understanding of modern warfare. The battlefield wasn't just physical space or even cyber infrastructure. It was the invisible realm where information flowed, where security systems operated, and where the most dangerous threats weren't the ones that triggered alarms, but the ones that silently collected everything they needed while convincing you that all was well. Outside the conference room window, Westridge continued to function with its usual military precision. Personnel moved between buildings, vehicles navigated the compound, and communications flowed through newly secured channels. To a casual observer, nothing would appear different from any other day. But everything had changed. And as Eliza followed Dr. Reeves toward the Technical Operations Center where their real work would begin, she understood that her role in that change was just beginning. The secure room within Westridge's Technical Operations Center hummed with the soft electronic pulse of advanced monitoring equipment. The space had been cleared of all non-essential personnel, leaving only those with direct involvement in the investigation. Dr. Sophia Reeves worked methodically at the main console, her fingers moving across the keyboard with practiced precision, while displays around her filled with complex data patterns that told the story of a sophisticated electronic intrusion. Captain Eliza Morgan watched from a secondary workstation, mapping compromised systems against operational timelines to identify exactly what information had been targeted. "Their extraction algorithm is remarkably efficient," Dr. Reeves noted, studying a particularly complex data sequence. "It prioritizes high-value intelligence while ignoring routine communications, meaning they knew exactly what they were looking for." Eliza nodded, the implications settling like a weight across her shoulders. which suggests either prior knowledge of our classification systems or advanced AI capabilities able to distinguish valuable intelligence from background noise. Or both, Dr. Reeves replied, her voice carrying the calm certainty that Eliza had come to recognize as her default state. 4 hours had passed since the confrontation in the conference room, 4 hours of intensive investigation revealing a breach far more extensive than initially estimated. The intrusion hadn't just affected Westridge's current operations. It had systematically extracted historical data, personnel files, and strategic planning documents dating back 18 months. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes entered, carrying a tablet with preliminary findings from the Sentinel team's investigation of the relay station. The equipment we recovered is highly advanced, military-grade hardware with custom modifications that aren't consistent with any known commercial or government systems. She placed the tablet before Dr. Reeves, who studied the images with focused attention. The encryption modules have been altered to create a hybrid system. That's why our standard detection protocols failed to identify the intrusion. They were looking for recognized patterns, while this operates on principles specifically designed to evade them. Major Donovan joined them. His normally composed expression tightened with concern. We've completed initial personnel verification. Everyone with system access has been accounted for, and their movements over the past 3 months reviewed. No obvious security anomalies. Which means either we're dealing with an extraordinary remote intrusion capability or Eliza let the thought hang unfinished. Or someone with legitimate access has been compromised, Dr. Reeves completed. Possibly without their knowledge. The atmosphere in the room grew heavier. The possibility that the breach involved internal cooperation, whether willing or unwitting, transformed a technical security issue into something far more complex and potentially damaging to the organization's cohesion. Dr. Reeves turned from her workstation, addressing the small team directly. We need to approach this methodically. The intrusion has been contained, but understanding its full scope requires more than technical analysis. We need to identify exactly what they were targeting and why. She gestured to the main display where a complex network diagram showed the flow of information through Westridge's systems. The extraction pattern wasn't random. There are clear priorities: operational planning for the Northern European theater, personnel deployments in 3 specific regions, and detailed intelligence assessments of emerging technologies in non-allied nations. That's oddly specific, Hayes noted, studying the pattern. Almost like they were building a comprehensive picture of our strategic positioning, rather than seeking tactical advantages. Exactly, Dr. Reeves agreed. This isn't about immediate military advantages. It's about long-term intelligence gathering for strategic planning. They're mapping our capabilities, our deployment patterns, and our technological development priorities. Eliza moved to the main display, identifying something in the data flow that caught her attention. There's a secondary extraction pattern focused on our counterintelligence operations. Specifically, our methods for detecting and tracking foreign operatives within sensitive areas. Dr. Reeves studied the pattern Eliza had identified, her expression shifting almost imperceptibly. They're not just collecting our intelligence, they're learning how we collect intelligence. That's considerably more sophisticated than standard espionage operations. The door opened and General Keller entered with Colonel Harrington. Their expression suggested the briefing with higher command had been tense. Update, Keller said simply, her tone making it clear this wasn't a request but a command. Dr. Reeves gestured to the displays. The intrusion was more sophisticated and targeted than initially assessed. They were collecting specific categories of intelligence related to strategic positioning, technological development, and counterintelligence methodologies. The pattern suggests preparation for long-term strategic competition rather than immediate tactical advantage. Any indication of who's responsible? Harrington asked. The technology signatures are deliberately obscured, Dr. Reeves replied. The equipment uses components from multiple sources, some commercial, some military, some custom-designed. It's specifically engineered to prevent attribution. General Keller moved closer to the displays, studying the extraction patterns with the practiced eye of someone who had spent decades in intelligence work. This level of sophistication narrows the field. Not many organizations have both the technical capability and the strategic patience for an operation of this scale. What about the individuals in custody? Eliza asked. Professional operatives, Keller replied. Highly trained, no identifying information. They're maintaining complete silence during questioning. As expected, Dr. Reeves noted, field personnel in operations this sophisticated are compartmentalized. They probably know only what they needed to know for their specific role. The implications hung heavily in the air. They had contained the immediate breach, but the larger threat remained unidentified and active. Whoever had orchestrated this operation had the resources, expertise, and patience to target America's most secure military installations with unprecedented precision. "Where do we go from here?" Colonel Harrington asked, his initial skepticism now replaced with grim determination. Dr. Reeves closed the analysis program on her workstation, the displays shifting to a secure desktop. "First, we implement complete security overhaul, new encryption protocols, enhanced monitoring systems, and revised access procedures. Second, we conduct a comprehensive review of all information potentially compromised and assess operational impacts. Third, we establish a counterintelligence operation to identify the source and purpose of this intrusion." She turned to face the assembled team directly. This wasn't an isolated incident. The pattern and sophistication suggest a coordinated campaign targeting multiple high-value intelligence nodes. Westridge wasn't the first, and it won't be the last. "You've seen this before," Eliza observed, the realization crystallizing as she spoke. "That's why you knew exactly what to look for when you arrived." Dr. Reeves met her gaze directly. "Yes. Similar intrusions have been detected at 7 other facilities over the past 3 months. Each one using variations of the same methodology, each one targeting specific categories of strategic intelligence." General Keller's expression remained carefully neutral, but Eliza noticed the slight tension in her posture, the tell of someone who already knew this information but hadn't shared it with the others present. "Why wasn't this briefed to facility commanders?" Harrington asked, his tone carefully controlled but edged with frustration. "Because we couldn't be certain how the intrusions were being facilitated," Keller replied. "If someone with command authority was involved, either knowingly or unwittingly, briefing facility leadership could have compromised the investigation." The statement landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples of tension through the room. The implication that command staff might be compromised struck at the heart of military structure, the foundational trust that enabled the organization to function. "We're not suggesting anyone at Westridge is deliberately involved," Dr. Reeves clarified, her tone matter-of-fact rather than apologetic. "But sophisticated intelligence operations often exploit unwitting participants, individuals who provide access or information without realizing how it will be used." Harrington's jaw tightened, but he nodded in acknowledgement of the logic. Trust was essential in military operations, but so was security. Sometimes the two principles came into conflict. "What's our immediate course of action?" Hayes asked, redirecting the conversation toward practical next steps. Dr. Reeves turned to General Keller. "With your permission, I'd like Captain Morgan to join the task force investigating these intrusions. Her signals intelligence background and pattern recognition skills would be valuable to the team." Eliza felt a momentary surge of surprise. She had been assisting with the investigation as assigned, but joining a specialized task force represented a significant change in her responsibilities and potentially her career trajectory. General Keller studied Eliza thoughtfully before responding. "Captain Morgan's current assignment involves coordinating intelligence support for operations in 3 theaters. Her expertise would be difficult to replace, which is precisely why she would be valuable to the investigation," Dr. Reeves countered. "Her understanding of how intelligence flows between operational theaters gives her unique insight into what the intruders might be targeting and why." Keller considered this for a moment, then nodded. "Approved. Captain Morgan will temporarily transfer to the task force, effective immediately. Colonel Harrington, arrange for her responsibilities to be redistributed among your staff." "Yes, General," Harrington replied, though Eliza noted the slight hesitation that suggested he wasn't entirely comfortable with losing one of his key intelligence officers at such a critical time. "Thank you, General," Dr. Reeves said, her tone conveying professional appreciation rather than personal gratitude. She turned to Eliza. "We'll depart for the Joint Counterintelligence Facility at 0600 tomorrow. Pack for extended deployment. This investigation could take weeks." The meeting concluded with assignment of specific responsibilities. Hayes would oversee the security overhaul at Westridge. Donovan would coordinate with the Sentinel team on analysis of the recovered equipment, and Harrington would manage the operational impact assessment. Throughout the discussion, Eliza observed Dr. Reeves, noting how she guided the conversation with subtle expertise, ensuring all critical issues were addressed without overtly taking command from the military leadership. As the others departed to begin their assignments, General Keller gestured for Eliza and Dr. Reeves to remain behind. When the room had cleared, she activated the enhanced privacy protocols, creating a secure environment where even sophisticated surveillance would be ineffective. "What you're about to hear doesn't leave this room," Keller began, her voice carrying the weight of decades of classified operations. "The intrusions we've detected aren't isolated incidents. They're part of a coordinated campaign that appears to be mapping our entire intelligence infrastructure, not just collecting information, but understanding how we process, analyze, and act on that information." Dr. Reeves nodded. "The pattern suggests they're creating a comprehensive model of our decision-making processes. Not just what we know, but how we know it, and how we respond to what we know. Which is considerably more dangerous than traditional intelligence gathering," Eliza observed, the implications becoming clearer with each new piece of information. "They're not just stealing secrets, they're learning how we think." "Precisely," Keller confirmed. "And that level of meta-intelligence represents a fundamental shift in the intelligence landscape. If a hostile actor can predict not just what we know, but how we'll respond to that knowledge, they can manipulate our decision-making processes in ways we might not detect until it's too late." Eliza felt the weight of this revelation settle across her shoulders. Throughout her career, she had worked within the traditional paradigm of intelligence operations: gather information, analyze patterns, develop assessments, inform decision-makers. The idea that this entire process could be modeled, predicted, and potentially manipulated by external actors represented a threat of an entirely different magnitude. "How widespread is this?" she asked. Dr. Reeves exchanged a glance with General Keller before responding. "We've confirmed similar intrusions at 12 military installations and intelligence centers. Based on the pattern, we suspect at least twice that number may be compromised, but haven't yet been detected." "My God," Eliza breathed, the scale of the operation coming into focus. "That would represent the most extensive intelligence breach in modern history." "Which is why we've been conducting the investigation with extreme compartmentalization," Keller explained. "If this becomes widely known before we've identified the source and methodology, it could trigger panic responses that might actually accelerate the compromise." Dr. Reeves opened her portfolio and removed a small data drive, placing it on the table between them. "This contains everything we've gathered so far: intrusion patterns, compromised systems, extracted data categories, and preliminary analysis of potential sources. Review it before we depart tomorrow. It will provide context for what we're facing." Eliza picked up the drive, the small device suddenly feeling much heavier than its physical dimensions would suggest. It represented not just information but responsibility. Knowledge of a threat that few others shared, and fewer still fully understood. "Why me?" she asked, the question that had been forming since Dr. Reeves first requested her assignment to the task force. "There are more senior intelligence officers with more extensive experience in counterintelligence operations." Dr. Reeves studied her with that same evaluating gaze Eliza had noticed in their first encounter: clinical but not cold, assessing but not judgmental. "Because you notice things that others miss. Your service record shows multiple instances where you identified patterns or anomalies that more experienced analysts overlooked. That kind of intuitive pattern recognition can't be taught. It's either part of how someone thinks or it isn't." General Keller nodded in agreement. "There's also the matter of your background before joining the military. Your doctoral work in cognitive systems analysis provides a theoretical framework that's particularly relevant to understanding this type of meta-intelligence gathering." Eliza felt a momentary disorientation. Her academic background was part of her personnel file, but rarely discussed in operational contexts. Most of her colleagues knew her only as a capable intelligence officer, not as someone who had once specialized in understanding how complex systems processed and responded to information. "You've been researching me," she observed, looking at Dr. Reeves. "I research everyone I work with," Dr. Reeves replied without apology. In this line of work, knowing who you can trust and what they bring to the table isn't just professional courtesy, it's operational necessity. The statement should have felt invasive, but something in Dr. Reeves' straightforward delivery made it seem like simple pragmatism rather than personal intrusion. This wasn't about Eliza as an individual, it was about the skills and perspective she could contribute to addressing a critical threat. The task force you'll be joining consists of specialists from various intelligence disciplines, General Keller explained, each selected for specific expertise relevant to understanding and countering this new form of intelligence operation. You'll be briefed on the full team composition when you arrive at the facility. Dr. Reeves stood, gathering her materials with the same efficient movements Eliza had observed throughout their interaction. Review the data tonight. Be prepared for departure at 0600. Pack light but comprehensive. We may be operating from multiple locations as the investigation progresses. With that, she departed, leaving Eliza alone with General Keller. The general waited until the door had closed before speaking again. A word of advice, Captain. Dr. Reeves can be challenging to work with. Her focus on operational objectives sometimes overshadows conventional interpersonal considerations. You mean she doesn't care about hurt feelings? Eliza translated. A brief smile crossed Keller's face. Something like that. She expects excellence and doesn't waste time with niceties when she doesn't receive it. But she's also the most brilliant counterintelligence specialist I've ever encountered. If anyone can unravel what we're facing, it's her. Understood, General. One more thing, Keller added as Eliza prepared to leave. The handshake refusal. It wasn't just a test of our security protocols. Dr. Reeves has reason to believe that microtrackers are being used to monitor key personnel involved in the investigation. Physical contact is one potential transfer vector. The information shifted Eliza's understanding of the earlier interaction. What had seemed like perhaps unnecessary provocation now appeared as practical operational security, another layer of protection against a threat whose full dimensions they were still discovering. "How deep does this go?" she asked quietly. Keller's expression grew solemn. "That's what you're going to help us find out, Captain. Because right now, we don't know if we're dealing with the most sophisticated foreign intelligence operation in history or something even more concerning." More concerning than a massive foreign intelligence operation? Yes, Keller replied simply, offering no elaboration. Now go prepare. Tomorrow begins a new chapter in your career, one I suspect will prove more challenging and consequential than anything you've encountered before. Hours later, Eliza sat in her quarters. The secure data tablet Dr. Reeves had provided glowing softly in the darkened room. She had spent the past 3 hours reviewing the information on the drive, each new file adding another dimension to a threat that seemed to grow more complex and disturbing with every detail revealed. The pattern of intrusions stretched back further than initially indicated. Not 3 months, but nearly a year of carefully coordinated intelligence gathering across multiple military and government systems. The targeting wasn't random or opportunistic, but methodically structured to build a comprehensive model of American intelligence operations, decision-making processes, and strategic planning mechanisms. Most concerning was the analysis suggesting that the intrusions represented not just collection but experimentation, testing different approaches, observing responses, and refining methodologies based on results. It was the pattern of an adversary that was learning, adapting, and evolving its approach with each new operation. Eliza paused the review, rubbing her eyes as she processed the implications. Throughout her intelligence career, she had operated within a framework that assumed certain boundaries and limitations to what adversaries could achieve. Those boundaries were now being systematically dismantled, revealing vulnerabilities in systems previously considered secure. Her phone chimed with a secure message, "Drive." Reeves confirming their departure details for the morning. The message was brief, precise, and entirely focused on operational logistics, exactly what Eliza had come to expect from the enigmatic specialist. As she prepared for sleep, knowing the coming days would demand her full mental acuity, Eliza found herself reflecting on the strange sequence of events that had begun with a refused handshake and 5 words that had silenced a room of experienced military officers. "I'm here to save lives." At the time, the statement had seemed dramatic, perhaps even theatrical. Now, understanding the scale and sophistication of the threat they faced, those 5 words carried a weight and urgency that transcended their simple construction. Lives were indeed at stake. Not just individual operatives, but potentially the entire infrastructure of national security that protected millions. Tomorrow she would join a specialized task force dedicated to understanding and countering a threat that few people knew existed and fewer still comprehended. It represented a fundamental shift in her career, and perhaps in the very nature of intelligence operations in the modern era. As she drifted towards sleep, one question lingered in her mind. In a world where the boundaries between friend and foe, secure and compromised, known and unknown, were increasingly blurred, how did you fight an enemy that didn't just collect your secrets, but learned how you thought? The answer, she suspected, awaited her at the Joint Counterintelligence Facility, and in the continuing enigma that was Dr. Sophia Reeves. The Joint Counterintelligence Facility didn't exist on any official maps. Nestled in the rolling hills of Virginia's countryside, the complex of modernist buildings appeared from the outside to be a private research center, one of dozens that dotted the landscape around Washington, D.C. Only the subtle security measures, cameras disguised as landscape lighting, ground sensors hidden beneath manicured lawns, and the occasional patrol by personnel in unmarked vehicles hinted at its true purpose. The helicopter that transported Eliza and Dr. Reeves from Westridge touched down on a landing pad partially concealed by architectural elements designed to minimize its visibility from aerial surveillance. They were met by a security team whose efficient movements and alert posture spoke of extensive training and experience. "Welcome to Chimera," said a woman who introduced herself only as Director Lawson. She appeared to be in her early 50s, with steel gray hair cut in a practical bob, and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to authority. "We've been expecting you." The greeting was directed equally to both arrivals, but Eliza noticed that Director Lawson's attention seemed primarily focused on Dr. Reeves, suggesting a pre-existing professional relationship. They were escorted through a series of security checkpoints, each more sophisticated than the last, before finally arriving at a conference room where 6 other individuals waited. "Our core team," Director Lawson explained as they entered, "selected for their specific expertise relevant to the Obsidian Protocol investigation." Eliza noted the designation Obsidian Protocol, filing it away as the official classification for the investigation into the intrusions they had detected. The assembled specialists represented diverse backgrounds. 2 appeared to be technical analysts based on their interaction with the advanced systems that lined the walls. One had the bearing of military intelligence, another the more reserved demeanor typical of diplomatic security, and 2 others whose roles weren't immediately obvious. "Dr. Reeves, good to have you back," said one of the technical specialists, a man in his late 30s with perpetually rumpled clothing and the intense focus of someone more comfortable with data than people. "The patterns you identified at Westridge match what we're seeing across the network. Same methodology, same targeting priorities, just adapted to the specific information architecture of each facility." Dr. Reeves nodded, immediately moving to review the displays that showed intrusion patterns across multiple systems. "Any progress on attribution?" "Still inconclusive," replied the woman with the diplomatic security bearing. "The technology signatures are deliberately obscured, and the operational methodology doesn't align cleanly with known actors. Either we're dealing with someone entirely new or someone who's significantly evolved their approach." Director Lawson gestured for Eliza to join them at the central table. "Captain Morgan will be joining the analytical team, focusing on pattern recognition and operational impact assessment. Her background in signals intelligence and cognitive systems analysis provides a perspective we've been missing." The introduction was met with professional nods from the assembled specialists, though Eliza detected a hint of curiosity in their expressions. New additions to specialized teams were always evaluated carefully, particularly in high-stakes investigations where trust and competence were equally critical. "Let's start with the overview," Lawson continued, activating a secure display that dominated one wall of the conference room. "As of this morning, we've confirmed intrusions at 17 military and intelligence facilities. Based on pattern analysis, we suspect an additional 12 may be compromised but haven't yet been conclusively verified." The display showed a map of the United States overlaid with markers indicating confirmed and suspected intrusions. The pattern wasn't random. It followed a clear progression through critical nodes in the national security infrastructure, systematically building a comprehensive picture of American intelligence operations. "The targeting is strategic," observed the military intelligence officer, a colonel whose name badge identified him as Reynolds. They're not just collecting isolated pieces of intelligence. They're mapping how information flows through our entire system, from collection to analysis to operational planning. Exactly, Dr. Reeves agreed, studying the pattern with focused attention. This isn't about specific secrets. It's about understanding our decision-making architecture, how we gather information, how we process it, how we transform it into operational directives. They're creating a model of our cognitive processes at an institutional level. Eliza studied the display, her mind automatically searching for patterns within patterns, connections that might not be immediately obvious to others. There's a temporal sequence here, she noted, indicating the progression of intrusions across the map. They're not just selecting targets based on information value, but on how that information connects to previously compromised systems. Each new intrusion builds on what they've already learned from previous operations. Dr. Reeves looked at her with what might have been approval. Good observation. They're constructing a progressively more sophisticated understanding, using each new piece of intelligence to refine their approach to the next target, which suggests patience and long-term strategic thinking, added the second technical specialist, a woman whose workspace was surrounded by complex analytical models. This isn't a smash-and-grab operation. They're methodically building something, a comprehensive model of our entire intelligence ecosystem. Director Lawson moved the briefing forward, outlining what they had learned from the equipment recovered at Westridge and other compromised facilities. The technology was a sophisticated hybrid, incorporating elements from various sources but assembled in ways that defied easy categorization or attribution. Whoever designed this understands not just our technical security measures but the analytical processes we use to identify and attribute intrusions, Lawson explained. They've deliberately constructed their approach to exploit gaps in our detection methodology. As the briefing continued, Eliza found herself increasingly drawn to a particular aspect of the intrusion pattern, the way it systematically targeted not just current operational data, but historical information about how decisions had been made in previous situations. They're not just mapping what we know, she said during a pause in the presentation. They're mapping how we learn. The historical data they're extracting shows how our analysis has evolved over time, how we've adapted to new challenges and information. They're studying our adaptive processes. The observation created a momentary silence in the room as the implications registered with the assembled specialists. Understanding an adversary's current capabilities was standard intelligence work. Understanding how they evolved those capabilities over time represented a deeper and more concerning level of insight. If that's correct, Dr. Reeves said, then we're facing something more sophisticated than traditional intelligence gathering. They're developing the capacity to predict not just our current responses, but how those responses will evolve as situations develop. Predictive modeling of adaptive systems, Eliza confirmed, drawing on her academic background in cognitive systems analysis. It's a methodology that allows for anticipating not just immediate reactions, but the evolution of those reactions over time. Director Lawson's expression grew more serious, which would represent a fundamental shift in the intelligence landscape. If an adversary can predict not just what we know, but how our understanding and response will evolve, they can manipulate situations in ways specifically designed to shape our decision-making processes. The briefing transitioned into a detailed analysis of the technical aspects of the intrusions, the methods used to bypass security, the data extraction techniques, and the sophisticated mechanisms for concealing the operations from standard detection systems. Throughout the presentation, Eliza observed Dr. Reeves, noting how she integrated new information into her understanding with remarkable efficiency, asking precise questions that often revealed connections others had missed. As the formal briefing concluded and the team transitioned to discussing next steps, Director Lawson pulled Eliza aside for a private conversation. "Your contribution about adaptive learning patterns was insightful," she said. "It's precisely the kind of perspective we needed on this investigation. Dr. Reeves was right to request your assignment to the team." "Thank you, Director," Eliza replied, "though I'm still trying to understand the full scope of what we're facing." Lawson's expression became more solemn. "Aren't we all? In 30 years of intelligence work, I've never encountered an operation with this level of sophistication and strategic patience. Whoever is behind this has been planning it for years, possibly decades. Do we have any leading theories on attribution? Quote, several, none entirely satisfactory. Lawson glanced toward where Dr. Reeves was engaged in detailed technical discussion with the analysis team. The most concerning possibility isn't a foreign government but a non-state actor with advanced capabilities and strategic objectives that don't align with traditional geopolitical motivations. A private intelligence organization? Eliza asked, though even as she said it, she recognized how inadequate the description felt for what they were facing. Perhaps, Lawson replied. Or something entirely new. An evolutionary development in the intelligence landscape that we don't yet have appropriate terminology to describe. The conversation was interrupted by Dr. Reeves, who approached with focused intensity. We need to re-examine the Westridge data. There's something in the extraction pattern that doesn't align with what we're seeing at other facilities. Lawson nodded. Use Analysis Room 3. It's been prepared with the secure access you'll need. As they moved through the facility toward the designated workspace, Eliza found herself studying Dr. Reeves with renewed curiosity. Throughout the briefing, the specialist had demonstrated not just expertise but an intuitive understanding of the intrusion methodology that suggested deeper familiarity than would be expected even from a counterintelligence expert. Analysis Room 3 proved to be a state-of-the-art workspace, equipped with advanced systems specifically designed for detecting and analyzing sophisticated electronic intrusions. Dr. Reeves immediately began configuring the equipment, her movements displaying the practiced efficiency of someone who had performed similar operations many times before. The Westridge intrusion contained an anomaly, she explained as she worked. A secondary extraction pattern focused on a specific category of intelligence that doesn't appear in the other compromised facilities. Eliza moved to assist, her own technical background allowing her to understand the complex analytical systems. What category? Psychological profiling data, Dr. Reeves replied, bringing up the relevant extraction patterns on the main display. Specifically, assessments of how key intelligence personnel respond to uncertain information and evolving threat scenarios. The significance of this targeting wasn't immediately obvious until Eliza considered it in context with their earlier discussion of adaptive learning patterns. They're not just studying our institutional decision-making processes, they're analyzing the cognitive patterns of individual analysts and decision-makers. Exactly, Dr. Reeves confirmed. Which represents a level of sophisticated targeting that goes beyond even what we've observed in the other intrusions. They're building models not just of our systems but of the people who operate those systems. The implications were disturbing on multiple levels. Understanding how institutions processed information was concerning enough. Mapping the cognitive patterns of individual intelligence officers represented a much more intimate and potentially dangerous form of intelligence gathering. As they delved deeper into the analysis, a pattern began to emerge that connected the Westridge anomaly to subtler elements in other intrusions. A systematic effort to map not just formal decision-making processes, but the human factors that influenced how information was interpreted and acted upon. This isn't standard intelligence gathering, Eliza observed, the realization crystallizing as she spoke. This is more like cognitive mapping. They're creating a comprehensive model of how we think, individually and institutionally. Dr. Reeves looked at her with an expression that suggested Eliza had confirmed something she already suspected, which would allow them to predict how we would respond to specific information or situations with unprecedented accuracy. And potentially to manipulate those responses by controlling what information we receive and how it's presented, Eliza added, the full implications coming into focus. They could shape our perception of events, guide our analysis in specific directions, even influence operational decisions, all without us realizing we're being manipulated. The room fell silent as they both absorbed the gravity of what they were discovering. This wasn't just an intelligence breach. It was potentially a fundamental compromise of the entire decision-making infrastructure that protected national security. After several moments, Dr. Reeves spoke again, her voice carrying a measured intensity that Eliza hadn't heard before. This level of sophisticated targeting suggests whoever is behind this operation has a deep understanding of cognitive systems analysis, not just the technical aspects but the theoretical foundations that underpin the field. Something in her tone made Eliza look up from the displays, studying the specialist with renewed attention. You sound like you have a theory about who that might be. Dr. Reeves was quiet for a moment, her expression carefully neutral as she seemed to weigh how much to share. There are very few organizations with both the technical capabilities and the theoretical knowledge necessary for an operation of this sophistication. Even fewer with the strategic patience to implement it over years rather than months. But you suspect one in particular? Eliza pressed, sensing there was more to the specialist's assessment than she was revealing. I have a hypothesis, Dr. Reeves acknowledged. One that I'm not yet ready to share with the full team because the implications would be significant. Before Eliza could ask for clarification, Director Lawson entered the analysis room, her expression suggesting urgent developments. We've detected a new intrusion pattern at Fort Camston, she announced. Same methodology but accelerated implementation timeline. They're moving faster, possibly because they know we've identified their previous operations. Dr. Reeves immediately shifted focus, bringing up the new data on their analytical systems. They're adapting. This isn't just the same approach applied to a new target. They've modified their techniques based on what they've learned from our countermeasures at Westridge and other facilities. Which means they're not just collecting intelligence, they're actively monitoring our response to their operations, Eliza noted, the realization adding yet another layer of complexity to an already concerning situation. We need to move, Dr. Reeves said, already gathering her equipment. If they're accelerating their timeline, we need to be on site at Fort Camston immediately. The intrusion is still in progress, which gives us an opportunity to capture more than just the technology. We might be able to trace it back to its control point while the connection is active. Director Lawson nodded. I've already arranged transport. The rest of the team will continue analyzing the pattern connections you've identified here while you assess the new intrusion firsthand. As they prepared for immediate deployment, Eliza found herself reflecting on how quickly her role had evolved, from base intelligence officer to key analyst, in what was potentially one of the most significant counterintelligence operations in recent history. The rapid progression was both exhilarating and sobering, a reminder of how quickly the landscape could change when facing adversaries who operated beyond conventional boundaries. Fort Camston was a major intelligence coordination center located in the southwestern United States, responsible for integrating information from multiple collection platforms and distributing analyzed intelligence to operational commands across 3 continents. A compromise there wouldn't just expose current intelligence, but could potentially reveal the methodologies used to collect, analyze, and disseminate sensitive information throughout the entire military structure. The transport, a military aircraft modified for rapid deployment of specialized teams, was already waiting when they reached the facility's airfield. As they boarded, Dr. Reeves provided a more detailed briefing on what they were facing. Fort Camston's network architecture is different from Westridge and the other compromised facilities, she explained. They use a distributed processing system with multiple redundancy layers and segregated security domains. Breaching that kind of infrastructure requires not just technical sophistication but intimate knowledge of how the systems were designed and implemented, which further narrows the field of potential actors, Eliza noted, connecting this new information with their earlier discussion. Precisely, Dr. Reeves agreed. And it supports the hypothesis I've been developing about who might be behind these operations. As the aircraft lifted off, Eliza decided to press for more information. You mentioned a hypothesis earlier but didn't elaborate. Given what we're heading into, don't you think I should know what you suspect? Dr. Reeves studied her for a long moment. That now familiar, evaluating gaze that seemed to assess not just the question, but the person asking it. Finally, she reached a decision. What I'm about to share isn't confirmed, and the implications are significant enough that I've been hesitant to voice them without more concrete evidence, she began. But given your background in cognitive systems analysis and what you've already identified in the intrusion patterns, you're likely to reach similar conclusions on your own. She paused, ensuring they wouldn't be overheard by the flight crew before continuing. I believe we're facing an operation designed and implemented by former intelligence personnel with extensive experience in American methodologies and systems. People who were once part of the very infrastructure they're now targeting. The statement sent a chill through Eliza that had nothing to do with the aircraft's environmental controls. You're suggesting this is an inside operation, conducted by former American intelligence officers? Not exactly, Dr. Reeves clarified. I'm suggesting it was designed by people with intimate knowledge of our systems and methodologies. But it's being implemented by a separate organization with the resources and motivation to execute such an extensive campaign. A partnership between former insiders and an external actor. Eliza translated, the pieces beginning to align in her mind. That would explain the combination of precise targeting and technical sophistication we've been observing. It would, Dr. Reeves agreed. And it would also explain why the operation has been so difficult to attribute. It doesn't match the known signatures of traditional state actors, because it's a hybrid approach drawing on multiple sources of expertise and resources. As the aircraft continued its journey toward Fort Camston, Eliza processed this new information, considering its implications for their investigation and the broader security landscape. If Dr. Reeves was correct, they weren't just facing an external threat, but a complex operation that leveraged insider knowledge against the very systems those insiders had once helped build and protect. The realization was sobering, a reminder that in the evolving world of intelligence operations, the boundaries between friend and foe, insider and outsider, protector and threat, were increasingly blurred. What awaited them at Fort Camston wasn't just another intrusion to analyze, but potentially a pivotal moment in understanding a new kind of threat, one that operated in the shadows between traditional categories and exploited the connections between them. As the landscape below transitioned from the green hills of Virginia to the more arid terrain of the Southwest, Eliza prepared herself for what promised to be a critical confrontation, not just with the technical aspects of the intrusion, but with the broader implications of what they were discovering about the changing nature of intelligence operations in the modern era. The approaching challenge would test not just her professional skills, but her fundamental understanding of how security and threat, knowledge and vulnerability, protection and exploitation were interconnected in ways that traditional models failed to fully capture. Fort Camston represented not just another investigation, but a potential turning point in her understanding of the complex landscape she had dedicated her career to navigating. Fort Camston rose from the desert landscape like a modernist fortress. Angular buildings of reinforced concrete and tinted glass arranged in a pattern that prioritized function over aesthetics. As their aircraft touched down on the restricted landing zone, Eliza noted the heightened security posture evident throughout the facility. Additional guards patrolled the perimeter, and mobile scanning units had been deployed at strategic points to detect unauthorized electronic signatures. They were met by Brigadier General Marcus Holloway, Fort Camston's commanding officer. Unlike Colonel Harrington at Westridge, Holloway's expression showed neither skepticism nor resistance, but the focused intensity of a commander who understood exactly what was at stake. Dr. Reeves, Captain Morgan. He greeted them with crisp efficiency. We've implemented the preliminary security protocols you transmitted. The compromised systems have been isolated, but left active to avoid alerting the intruders. Dr. Reeves nodded in approval. Good. We need to track the intrusion to its source, while the connection is still active. Have you identified the primary access point? Our technical team believes it originated through the satellite communication array, Holloway replied as he led them toward the main intelligence center. The intrusion signature was initially masked as routine maintenance protocols, which allowed it to bypass standard security checkpoints. Eliza noticed something in his phrasing. Initially masked, so something changed? One of our junior analysts noticed timing discrepancies in the data verification sequences, Holloway explained. Small irregularities that our automated systems dismissed as normal fluctuation. But that looked suspicious to human observation. She flagged it for review just hours before we received the alert from Chimera. Dr. Reeves and Eliza exchanged a glance, both recognizing the significance of this detail. Throughout their investigation, they had observed how the intrusions were specifically designed to exploit the gap between automated security systems and human intuition, hiding in the spaces where machines accepted what humans might question. I want to speak with this analyst, Dr. Reeves said as they entered the main building. The Intelligence Center at Fort Camston represented the cutting edge of information processing technology, a vast space filled with specialized workstations, holographic displays, and secure communication systems that collected, analyzed, and distributed intelligence across the global military network. Under normal circumstances, the facility hummed with the coordinated activity of dozens of specialists, managing the constant flow of information. Today, however, operations had been scaled back to essential personnel only, creating an unusual quiet that emphasized the gravity of the situation. Lieutenant Grace Winters, the analyst who had identified the anomaly, stood as they approached her workstation. She appeared to be in her late 20s, with the focused demeanor of someone who paid attention to details others might miss. "Walk me through exactly what you noticed," Dr. Reeves requested without preamble. Lieutenant Winters nodded, bringing up the relevant data on her display. "I was reviewing satellite communication logs as part of standard verification procedures. The automated system had flagged everything as normal, but I noticed these timing patterns." She indicated sequences of data transmission that showed subtle irregularities. The verification signals were consistently delayed by 1.3 milliseconds during specific transmission windows, too consistent to be random fluctuation but too subtle to trigger automated alerts. Dr. Reeves studied the pattern, nodding slowly. "Excellent observation. They were creating processing windows for data extraction, using the delay to copy information before allowing the original transmission to continue." "That's what I suspected," Winters agreed. "But what really caught my attention was how the pattern evolved over time. The delays started at 1.5 milliseconds 3 days ago, then gradually decreased to 1.3, almost as if the system was learning the optimal timing to avoid detection." This detail caused both Dr. Reeves and Eliza to focus more intently on the data. Adaptive intrusion methods represented a significant evolution beyond the already sophisticated techniques they had observed at other facilities. "They're not just implementing pre-programmed intrusion protocols," Eliza observed. "They're actively refining their approach based on real-time analysis of the target system's responses, which suggests either an AI-enhanced intrusion system or human operators with exceptional skill," Dr. Reeves added, her expression revealing nothing of what she might be thinking about this development. General Holloway, who had been listening to the exchange, addressed the immediate operational concern. "Can you trace it back to its source?" "Not directly," Dr. Reeves replied. "They're routing through multiple proxy servers and employing sophisticated masking techniques, but we can analyze the command and control signatures to identify patterns that might reveal their operational architecture." She turned to Eliza. "I need you to coordinate with Lieutenant Winters on mapping the data extraction patterns. Compare them with what we observed at Westridge and the other compromised facilities. Look for targeting priorities, sequencing anomalies, anything that might help us understand what specific intelligence they're prioritizing here." As Dr. Reeves moved to establish her specialized monitoring equipment, Eliza began working with Lieutenant Winters to analyze the extraction patterns. The intrusion at Fort Camston showed both similarities and differences compared to previous operations. The basic methodology was consistent, but the implementation had been refined, suggesting an evolving approach that learned from each new target. "They're focusing heavily on our analytical processing workflows," Winters noted as they mapped the compromised data streams. "Not just the intelligence itself, but how we integrate information from different sources and develop comprehensive assessments." Eliza recognized the significance immediately. "They're mapping your cognitive architecture, how Fort Camston transforms raw intelligence into actionable information. Combined with what they've extracted from other facilities, they're building a model of our entire intelligence processing ecosystem." The implications were becoming clearer with each new piece of information they uncovered. This wasn't just about stealing secrets. It was about understanding how those secrets were collected, analyzed, and transformed into operational decisions. Someone was systematically mapping the cognitive infrastructure of American intelligence, not just what they knew but how they knew it, and how they acted on that knowledge. Across the room, Dr. Reeves had established her specialized monitoring station and was conducting deep analysis of the intrusion methodology. Eliza observed her work with renewed appreciation for the specialist's expertise, her ability to identify patterns in the digital noise that others might miss, her intuitive understanding of how sophisticated adversaries thought and operated. After several hours of intensive analysis, a more complete picture began to emerge. The intrusion at Fort Camston represented an evolution of the methodology they had observed at previous facilities, more adaptive, more precise in its targeting, and more sophisticated in its ability to evade detection. "They're accelerating," Dr. Reeves observed during a brief consultation with the team. "The time between identifying a target and successfully compromising its systems has decreased with each new operation. What took them weeks at earlier facilities took days at Westridge and hours here at Fort Camston." "They're learning from each success," Eliza noted, "refining their approach based on what they encounter at each new target." And they're prioritizing certain types of intelligence, Lieutenant Winters added, indicating the extraction patterns they had mapped. Specifically, information about how we respond to uncertain or ambiguous intelligence. Situations where analysts have to make judgments based on incomplete information. This observation aligned with what they had discovered at Westridge, the focus on psychological profiling data and decision-making processes under conditions of uncertainty. The pattern was becoming clearer. Whoever was behind these intrusions was particularly interested in understanding how American intelligence personnel thought when faced with complex, ambiguous situations that required judgment rather than merely processing clear information. Dr. Reeves considered this information with focused intensity. They're building something more sophisticated than a simple intelligence collection operation. They're developing a predictive model of our entire decision-making infrastructure, from individual analysts to institutional processes, which would allow them to anticipate how we would respond to specific situations. General Holloway observed, the strategic implications clearly concerning him. They could potentially manipulate our perception of events to guide our decisions in directions that serve their interests. Precisely. Dr. Reeves confirmed. This represents a fundamental evolution in intelligence operations, moving beyond collecting information to shaping how that information is interpreted and acted upon. As they continued their analysis, Eliza detected something in the intrusion pattern that hadn't been present in previous operations. A secondary data stream that wasn't extracting information but seemed to be inserting something into Fort Campston's systems. Dr. Reeves, she called, bringing this anomaly to the specialist's attention. I'm detecting what appears to be an insertion protocol embedded within the extraction operation. They're not just taking data out, they're putting something in. Dr. Reeves moved quickly to Eliza's workstation, her expression sharpening as she examined the pattern. Good catch. This is new. We haven't observed this in previous intrusions. She analyzed the signature more closely, her expertise allowing her to identify nuances that might escape others. It's subtle, designed to establish dormant access points that could be activated later, even after the primary intrusion has been detected and removed. They're planting seeds for future operations. This discovery elevated the situation from serious to critical. Not only had Fort Campston's systems been compromised for intelligence collection, but they had potentially been modified to facilitate future intrusions that would be even more difficult to detect. We need to isolate and analyze these insertion points immediately, Dr. Reeves directed. This changes our approach. We're not just tracking an ongoing intrusion. We're dealing with an adversary who's establishing persistent access to critical systems. The team shifted focus, implementing specialized protocols designed to identify and isolate the inserted code without alerting the intruders to their discovery. As they worked, Eliza found herself reflecting on how the investigation had evolved, each new facility revealing another layer of sophistication in what was proving to be one of the most complex intelligence operations she had ever encountered. Dr. Reeves worked with focused intensity, her expertise evident in how she navigated the complex technical challenges they faced. There was something almost familiar in her approach, a pattern of thinking that resonated with Eliza's own background in cognitive systems analysis. The specialist didn't just understand the technical aspects of the intrusion. She seemed to grasp the underlying conceptual framework that guided its design and implementation. After several hours of intensive effort, they succeeded in mapping the full extent of both the extraction operation and the newly discovered insertion protocols. The picture that emerged was both impressive and concerning. A sophisticated intelligence operation that combined multiple techniques to not only collect current information, but establish foundations for future access. We've identified 37 distinct insertion points, Lieutenant Winters reported during their status briefing, each designed to provide specialized access to different subsystems within our network architecture. Some are programmed to activate on specific triggers, others to remain dormant until manually activated by external command, and all carefully engineered to resist standard removal protocols, Dr. Reeves added. Attempting to eliminate them using conventional methods would likely trigger secondary protocols designed to either preserve their functionality or alert their creators to our countermeasures. General Holloway absorbed this information with the gravity it deserved. So even after we shut down the active intrusion, these inserted access points remain a threat? Yes, Dr. Reeves confirmed, but now that we've identified them, we can develop specialized removal protocols that address their specific design characteristics. More importantly, we can use what we've learned to identify similar insertions at other facilities that may have gone undetected. The discovery represented both a challenge and an opportunity, a new dimension of the threat they faced, but also a chance to develop more effective countermeasures based on this deeper understanding of their adversary's methodology. As the technical team began implementing the specialized removal protocols Dr. Reeves had designed, she pulled Eliza aside for a private consultation. "What we've discovered here confirms my earlier hypothesis," she said, her voice low to ensure their conversation remained private. "The combination of sophisticated technical implementation with deep understanding of our cognitive architecture suggests exactly the kind of hybrid operation I suspected. Former insiders providing the conceptual framework, external resources supplying the technical capabilities and operational support." Eliza considered this assessment, connecting it with her own observations throughout the investigation. The insertion protocols particularly support that theory. They show intimate knowledge of system architecture that would be difficult to obtain without prior access or insider expertise. "Exactly," Dr. Reeves agreed. "And they target specific vulnerabilities that wouldn't be obvious to external observers, no matter how sophisticated their technical capabilities." She paused, seeming to consider how much more to share before continuing. "There's something else you should know. Something that provides context for why I've approached this investigation the way I have." The shift in her tone suggested this wasn't just additional technical information, but something more personal, perhaps even something that explained the specialist's unusual methods and demeanor that had been evident since their first encounter at Westridge. "I wasn't always counterintelligence," Dr. Reeves said after ensuring they wouldn't be overheard. 10 years ago, I led a specialized team developing advanced cognitive modeling systems for intelligence applications. Technology designed to help analysts process complex information more effectively by understanding the cognitive patterns that influence how we interpret and respond to intelligence. Quote, "The revelation provided context for Dr. Reeves' exceptional understanding of the intrusions they had been investigating, her ability to recognize not just the technical aspects, but the conceptual framework that guided their design. The program was terminated after concerns were raised about potential dual-use applications," she continued. "The same technology that could enhance our intelligence capabilities could potentially be used to model and predict our decision-making processes, exactly the kind of capability we're now facing from whoever is behind these intrusions." Eliza absorbed this information, its significance becoming clearer as she connected it with what they had observed throughout their investigation. "You think someone has continued developing that technology, perhaps even some of the people who originally worked on your program." "It's more than a suspicion at this point," Dr. Reeves confirmed. "The methodologies we're seeing in these intrusions bear unmistakable similarities to approaches we explored in that program, conceptual frameworks for modeling institutional cognitive processes that were unique to our research." The implications were profound. They weren't just facing an external threat, but potentially dealing with the consequences of America's own intelligence innovation being turned against its creators. It was a sobering reminder that in the complex world of advanced intelligence operations, the line between capability and vulnerability was often vanishingly thin. "Does Director Lawson know about this connection?" Eliza asked. "Yes," Dr. Reeves replied. "It's why I was assigned to lead this investigation. My familiarity with the conceptual foundations gives us an advantage in understanding what we're facing and developing effective countermeasures." Before they could continue this conversation, Lieutenant Winters approached with urgent news. "We've detected a change in the intrusion pattern. They know we're onto them. The extraction protocols have accelerated, and the command and control signatures are shifting to alternative channels." Dr. Reeves immediately returned to operational mode, moving quickly to address this development. "They're implementing contingency protocols. We need to track the new command and control channels before they can complete their extraction and disengage." The team mobilized with practiced efficiency, adjusting their monitoring systems to track the evolving intrusion pattern. What followed was an intense digital confrontation, the intruders attempting to complete their operation and withdraw without leaving traceable connections, the counterintelligence team working to maintain visibility on their activities and identify their control architecture. "They're routing through a commercial satellite network," Eliza observed, tracking the shifting communication patterns, using legitimate business traffic as cover for their command signals. Dr. Reeves nodded, already adjusting her equipment to focus on this new vector. Classic misdirection technique. The volume of normal traffic provides excellent cover for covert communications. Despite the sophistication of the adversary's contingency protocols, the team's preparation and Dr. Reeves' expertise allowed them to maintain visibility on the operation as it evolved. After nearly an hour of intense effort, they succeeded in tracing the command and control signals to a specific geographic region, not the precise location they had hoped for, but a significant narrowing of possibilities. Northern Europe, Dr. Reeves announced, studying the analytical results. The primary control signals are originating from somewhere in the Baltic region, though they're being routed through multiple intermediary points to obscure the exact location. This geographical identification represented their first concrete lead on the physical source of the operation, a critical step toward potentially identifying who was behind the sophisticated campaign of intrusions they had been investigating. General Holloway, who had been monitoring their progress, recognized the significance of this breakthrough. "I'll coordinate with European Command to arrange specialized surveillance of the identified region. If they're operating a significant technical infrastructure, there may be physical signatures we can detect now that we know where to look." As the immediate crisis response transitioned into more methodical investigation and remediation, Eliza found herself reflecting on how this experience had transformed her understanding of modern intelligence operations. The traditional paradigms that had guided her career, clear distinctions between friend and foe, internal and external, offense and defense, seemed increasingly inadequate for understanding the complex landscape they were navigating. Later that evening, as the technical team implemented the specialized removal protocols for the inserted access points, Eliza joined Dr. Reeves on the facility's observation deck. The desert sunset painted the landscape in dramatic hues of orange and purple, creating a striking contrast with the austere functionality of Fort Kempston's architecture. "What happens now?" Eliza asked, giving voice to the question that had been forming in her mind throughout the day. Dr. Reeves considered this for a moment before responding. "Now we evolve our approach based on what we've learned. The Baltic connection gives us a geographic focus for more traditional intelligence collection. The insertion protocols we've identified provide a template for detecting similar implementations at other facilities, and our understanding of their targeting priorities helps us anticipate where they might strike next. But it's not just about this specific threat, is it?" Eliza pressed, sensing there was a broader perspective that Dr. Reeves hadn't yet articulated. "What we're facing represents something more fundamental, a transformation in how intelligence operations function in the modern era." Dr. Reeves studied her with that evaluating gaze that had become familiar over their time working together. "You understand more than most," she acknowledged. "Yes, this is about more than a specific adversary or operation. It's about recognizing that the boundaries that define traditional intelligence work are increasingly irrelevant in a world where cognitive architecture is as important as physical infrastructure." She gestured toward the facility below them, where dozens of specialists managed the constant flow of information that formed the foundation of national security decision-making. "The most critical terrain isn't geographic anymore, it's cognitive. How we perceive, process, and respond to information is now the primary battleground. These intrusions are just one manifestation of that larger transformation." The assessment resonated with Eliza's own evolving understanding, drawing on both her military experience and her academic background in cognitive systems analysis. Throughout this investigation, she had been observing not just a sophisticated intelligence operation, but a fundamental shift in how security and vulnerability, knowledge and exploitation were interconnected in ways that traditional models failed to fully capture. "That first day at Westridge," she said, "when you refused Colonel Harrington's handshake and said those 5 words that silenced the room, you already understood all of this, didn't you? You knew we weren't just facing a security breach, but a fundamental challenge to how we think about intelligence operations." Dr. Reeves allowed a small smile, the first genuine expression of feeling Eliza had observed from the normally reserved specialist. "I knew we were facing something that required us to think differently about how we define and protect security. The handshake refusal wasn't just about operational security. It was about establishing from the beginning that conventional approaches wouldn't be sufficient for what we were facing." As the sun disappeared below the horizon and the first stars became visible in the darkening sky, Eliza felt a sense of both challenge and opportunity in what lay ahead. The investigation would continue, tracking the Baltic connection, identifying and securing other compromised facilities, developing new protocols to detect and counter this evolved form of intelligence operation. But beyond the immediate operational requirements, there was a more profound process of adaptation that would be required, not just in systems and procedures, but in how they conceptualized the very nature of security in an era where cognitive architecture had become the primary terrain of conflict. "I requested your assignment to this investigation for a reason," Dr. Reeves said, breaking the contemplative silence that had settled between them. "Your background in cognitive systems analysis gives you a perspective that most intelligence officers lack, an understanding of how information flows shape perception and decision-making. That perspective will be increasingly valuable as we continue to adapt to this new landscape." The statement carried both professional acknowledgement and an implicit invitation to continue this journey of discovery and adaptation, to be part of shaping how intelligence operations would evolve in response to the transformed threat environment they were encountering. As they turned to rejoin the ongoing operation inside, Eliza reflected on how her path had changed since that first encounter at Westridge, from base intelligence officer to participant in what was proving to be a pivotal moment in the evolution of modern security paradigms. The challenges ahead were significant, but so was the opportunity to contribute to something truly consequential: the development of new approaches to protecting national security in an era where the boundaries between knowledge and vulnerability had been fundamentally transformed. In refusing that handshake and speaking those 5 words that had silenced the room, Dr. Reeves hadn't just been announcing her presence. She had been signaling the arrival of a new era in intelligence operations, one that required not just technical expertise, but a fundamental reconsideration of how security was conceptualized and protected in a world where cognitive architecture had become the primary terrain of conflict. And in that moment of silence that followed, the journey that had brought them to this desert observation deck had begun, a journey of discovery, adaptation, and evolution that would continue long after the current investigation concluded. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.